what we're going to cover in this session is the thought around joy in dementia and caregiving. And at first blush, many of you who are probably in the middle of caregiving right now say, "You've really joy in caregiving?" Because it's certainly challenging. It's usually probably something we haven't necessarily planned for, but there are some things that we can do that give us those silver linings, if you will, as we take this journey of caregiving for a loved one. And while this topic today is going to be mostly focused on caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease, it can also apply to anyone who's a caregiver for somebody maybe with autism or other types of diagnoses. And the reason why I chose this photo, just FYI, I grew up in Southern California, and I want to just do a shout out to everyone who's joining us, because I know we have people from all around the country. But one of the things we're going to talk a little bit about is I grew up, we did road trips as a kid. The minute I got my license, we'd drive to the beach. And as my dad, as I became his caregiver for the last 3 years of his life, one of the things that we found that brought so much joy, and still does, even though he's been gone now 10 years, were the joy rides we would take back to his hometown, and we'd drive past his high school and all that. So I just kind of chose this photo because I also know that Hilarity for Charity has really great workshops called the Caregiver Road Trip, and it's all about that journey of caring for a loved one. So with that, I'm going to just kick into some of the information I wanted to share with you guys. So first of all, many of you probably already know this, but I usually break down Alzheimer's into 3 main stages. There's the early stage, and then there's the mid stage, and then there's the end stage. So just really quickly, the first stage is where your loved one is still going to want maybe that independence, that control over their life, but they may start wandering. We know 60% of people with Alzheimer's wander, and they may get lost. This is where you're going to turn maybe to certain technology, whether it's GPS that they can wear in a watch or on their belt, or even you can put a GPS chip in the shoes. You also want to make the home dementia-friendly design. So there's a lot of different nuances to look at in terms of modifying the home for certain safety factors. We know that people with Alzheimer's have more balance issues even than other older adults. So you want to make sure that you're doing anything that prevents those falls at home. And it's also the time to really have the conversations, whether it's all the legal paperwork, the financial picture, whatever it is, that's the time to do that. In the mid stage of the disease, now we're starting to see a lot more agitation, a lot more paranoia. This is also where about 70% of people with Alzheimer's might experience something called sundowning. Again, some of you may have already been through some of those episodes. They can be very disturbing. And interestingly, it's sundowning because it happens at dusk. And a lot of the reasons why that happens, we're still doing a lot of research around it, but we do know that the circadian rhythm, so that's the light and dark cycles, we're awake during the light, we're sleeping during the dark time. The circadian rhythms of someone with Alzheimer's are thrown off. And so they're much more active and restless at night. And then you might find them being a little bit more sleepier or sedentary during the day. And this is where it becomes really important to try to keep them active during the day. And I'm even seeing some research now being done in light therapy. So if during the weather, and we can't get our loved ones outside to take in that natural sunshine, because really that's what they need. They need more vitamin D in their system from the sunshine and natural light. You can use light therapy lamps, and it's, if you have them sit with a light therapy lamp, even for 20 minutes a day, it's going to help with the agitation and the sundowning that might happen later in the afternoon. So there's a lot of different things that are happening in that area. And this is also where noises become a lot more disruptive to people with Alzheimer's. So we have to be careful about certain loud banging noises or whatever is going on. And then where they are starting, of course, memory being a big part of this disease, it's much more about losing that short-term memory. So things you may have told them yesterday or last week, those are the memories that are certainly starting to be erased, and they're keeping more of those longer-term memories that are, a lot of it is when they were in their early, teens through the early 20s is the memories that many Alzheimer's patients keep. And then the longest. And then end stage, of course, is where a lot of the communication now, they won't be able to communicate. In the mid stage, we had to move to asking them questions where they can answer just yes or no. So nothing complex, nothing where they have to kind of think through your question. But in the end stage, they may not be able to communicate hardly at all. And so at this stage, what you're looking for is communicating through the eyes. You'll be able to see pain, fear, frustration, anger, joy, all those things that we're looking for. You can usually get that through eye contact. And this is also where a lot of the multisensory activities, and I'm going to talk a bit about this in a minute, become really important. So whether it's, the sound, sight, smell, taste, touch. Something else I just want to quickly mention for those of you who, again, may not yet be in the end stage with your loved one. It's a small percentage of people with Alzheimer's. We haven't done a whole lot of research around it, but about 10% right now of people who have Alzheimer's in the end stage will have something called terminal lucidity. And we also call it the rally. But it can be a little startling because somebody who hasn't communicated for a long time may all of a sudden become lucid. They may remember you. They may have a conversation with you. And it really is, it's like this miracle. And so many family caregivers really get excited about this. The unfortunate thing that we know about those types of episodes at end stage is that usually precipitates just a few days or maybe even just a few weeks before you actually lose your loved one. And again, we don't know a lot of the reasons why. There's research being done, but I just wanted to mention it because I think as we're sharing what this disease is about, knowing that these are some of the things that you may encounter become really important. And then there's you, because always in the caregiving journey, there's two people on this journey, right? There is the person who needs the care. And then, of course, there's us as the family caregivers. And many of you already know the 5 stages of grief being, first of all, denial. I think that's something we all do, no matter what the diagnosis is. But also then we go to anger. Why did this happen? This isn't right. How did this happen? We don't have Alzheimer's in our family. Then we go into bargaining. Well, what if I do this, or what if we change this up, or do this? That then leads into stages of depression over not having control, certainly over this disease, not being able to slow it or stop it or cure it. And then finally coming to acceptance. And David Kessler, who did a lot of work with the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who identified the 5 stages of grief, he wrote a book recently called The 6th Stage of Grief, which is meaning. And I think that's one that's really important. And it also speaks to this topic of kind of finding this joy in life, because through this experience of caregiving, we find meaning in life. It's a really profound, moment where we start to understand what life is about, what our role is, looking back over it, what we've gone through, and all of those things. And I think that every caregiving situation, we know it's not a one size fits all. It's all very personalized to us and our families and our loved ones. But I think these are probably the types of emotions that we're going through. Now, having said that, a lot of these emotions look or sound a bit negative until we get to acceptance. So I wanted to talk about quickly, what is joy? So first of all, happiness are those moments, right? Those moments, those feelings of, kind of euphoria, or, whatever it is, you're eating a sprinkles cupcake, or you're taking a joyride, or, maybe you went gambling and you won at the table, or whatever it is. But those are moments of joy, and they're usually brought about by external factors. And they don't linger. They're just those bursts of that dopamine reward in your brain that gives us a little bit of happiness. But joy
Hello?
is different. Joy is actually about
Hey, how you
your
doing?
attitude towards life, your feeling
I'm
of
just
contentment.
watching a sign,
Oh,
but I can step away for a moment. No, it's fine.
hi, you guys. Can you mute yourselves until we finish here, and then we can we can all talk together. So joy is about more of that contentment, that peace. It's really more about the internal
For someone across town.
feelings and emotions that you have. And, it's about bringing more calm, more balance, more hopefulness, and even gratitude into our lives. So happiness cannot happen all the time because we have to have the low moments. We've got to have the challenges in life. We've got to have some of those dark clouds so that we can really appreciate the rainbow. We can really appreciate the sun. And so it is a bit of a roller coaster, and that is just life. But joy is actually something that we can experience throughout life because it's an undercurrent both in the still waters, but also the chaotic rapids that we face when we take on challenges such as caregiving for a loved one. Now, something else that you may have heard of is FOMO, fear of missing out. And there's now a new phrase that's being thrown around out there, and it's called JOMO, and that means joy of missing out. So I just wanted to touch on these really quickly because these are topics I talk about in my book, Me Time Monday. FOMO is really about just what it says, fear. And fear is really about having external forces control us. So whether it's relationships, or whether it's social media or, other issues going on, the external forces are forcing us into things like anxiety or stress or depression. And this can certainly happen when we are caring for a loved one because we feel that we're missing out on other aspects of our life, or maybe we're not making it to, your son's soccer game, or, missing your daughter's rehearsal or recital at school, or something else going on with friends or family. And so we feel this pressure as family caregivers. And what we want to try to do is maybe learn how to flip that script into JOMO. And JOMO is about, again, it's an internal empowerment. It's about taking back the control of all of these external factors and figuring out ways to find peace with it, to not have us upset, have these things upset our daily lives, and to find that balance. And one of the things that I do is I set a lot of workshops for employers for their employees who may be caregiving. And we talk about what you learn through caregiving because we think caregiving takes us away. It takes things from us. It takes our time. It takes our me time. It takes, us maybe away from work, which we love. It takes us away from building, that career, whatever we might be doing, or it takes us away from our kids. But there is something that happens with caregiving. And a lot of you who have been parents, I think, have also experienced some of this because it is somewhat similar. But you learn patience, right? You learn listening skills, particularly with somebody with Alzheimer's. We have to really pay attention to what their words and what their behaviors are trying to tell us. We build empathy. We build compassion. We learn how to coordinate all kinds of different services. We do research. And, if you think about it, these are great skills for work too. I tell caregivers, if whether you step away from your job or whether it's just impacting your job, bring this to your supervisor, bring it to a new job interview. These are skills that you learn that are very valuable in the workplace as well. But these are all gifts that we don't want to overlook because it is part of your growth potential and your growth mindset. And, the other thing that happens is we feel like we're missing out, but actually we forget all the things we're learning. I learned through my caregiving journeys, both with my dad and my stepdad, I learned stories about them and about our family that in all these years, because I'm not a youngster, I had never heard before. And it was such a gift. It was really, really wonderful. I also learned a lot about myself because in understanding who our parents are, who our nurturers are in our life, our relationships, we start to then evaluate and see things in ourselves, both the good and the bad. And I think it gives us a sense of gratitude and satisfaction, but also a grounding in who we are or who we want to be. If you want to improve certain things, or if you appreciate now that I got this because my dad was like that or my mom was like that. So you can move from this fear of missing out on things in life to this JOMO, this joy of missing out because of all the other gifts that you're getting. And then just really quickly, I want to touch upon, I do, as I mentioned, workshops, the hormones that create the most happiness are certainly things like oxytocin. And oxytocin is our love, trust, and bonding hormone, and we get it mostly through physical touch. It can also be done just by physical proximity, looking into someone's eyes. But it really gives us that surge of trusting and bonding with someone. And again, as I mentioned, for someone with Alzheimer's in the later stage, having that physical touch, whether you're rubbing lotion in their hands, whether you're looking into their eyes to understand what they're feeling, becomes really vital. Now, serotonin actually doesn't start in our brain, it starts in our gut. And a lot of it is tied with nutrition and with our microbiome, but it's the hormone that boosts our mood. And we can get that serotonin, as I mentioned earlier, from vitamin D and from sunshine. And what happens with people who have Alzheimer's is they have lower levels of serotonin. So the more we can get them outside into sunshine, getting them walking, or if we need to wheel them in a wheelchair, whatever it is, or as I mentioned, my dad and I taking joy rides. You're out in the sunshine. It becomes a mood booster for both you and your loved one. Dopamine is our reward hormone. Now that one we have to be a little careful of because we can get into some bad habits. You know, maybe one, two, five, six glasses of wine that gives us a dopamine hit, maybe not the right one. So we have to pay attention to that dopamine and rewire our brains to get that dopamine from activities that we do with our loved one, that being present. And then endorphins are more about, euphoria and pain relief. And we get that from laughter, from falling in love or just loving somebody and expressing that love, from eating great food, from working out, dancing, listening to music, singing. We get all that from endorphins. And those are also ways we can connect with our loved one because they can also experience this. I think one of the things I didn't mention up front is very often with a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, we feel like, okay, this is awful. This is devastating. It's now going to be a decline, a deterioration, decay, disease, dementia. It's all the bad D words, right? We don't think that you can still experience joy. Despite a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia, you can still experience joy. And as a caregiver, you can still experience joy. It may be things, though, that, again, we have to flip that script and look at some of these things in a different light. And then just a couple other things I want to mention. In my book, I write about um, vibrational medicine, which is actually kind of a new trend in healthcare now. And we do it everything from how do you stimulate your muscles? And we can help people who have certain types of paralysis now. They can put on wearables that stimulate the muscles and give them more strength. There's also an emotional vibration chart, and that is the force field, the energy field that we have around us. It's typically about a 4-foot circle. And one of the things that we find is that when we are around people with negative energy, we start to absorb those emotions. So whether we feel like victims or this isn't right, this isn't fair, we're angry about stuff, or maybe loneliness. Very often I hear a lot of caregivers say, I feel lonely. I feel all alone in this journey. Even though you might have a partner, you might be married, you might have adult kids, you have friends, siblings, coworkers, whatever it is, you might have that sense of loneliness. Sometimes that loneliness can come because our loved one is feeling lonely, or they may be expressing that. And then we can also give off the feelings of how we're feeling to a loved one. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't allow yourself to feel all the varied emotions that we have. You have to go through the experiences of anger. That 5 stages of grief. Don't deny yourself what you're feeling. And anger is getting you to acceptance. You really don't get to acceptance unless you go through those stages. So being angry or being frustrated or being depressed or being sad, we have to sometimes give into our emotions, but we can't kind of marinate in it. We have to figure out ways that can bring us back around, that allow us the time to kind of, reset, take a breath, or whatever it is. Um, and I just wanted to mention really quickly because I think that Lauren said earlier in a session I was listening to that she was in Florida, I think it was, and she was showing the Taking Care documentary that was done on her journey with her mom with Alzheimer's. She was showing it to some high school kids. If you haven't seen that documentary, by the way, I really encourage you to take a look. I think you can now watch it online. Organizations are now showing it, but it's really, to me, it wasn't so much a documentary about Alzheimer's, it was about love stories. And the love stories were Lauren and her mom, Lauren's mom and her dad, and also Lauren and Seth. And, kudos to Seth for being a young man in his 20s who started to date a woman whose mother was just recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's and all the varied emotions that she went through, but also the great support that he was. And I think having someone who has your back is so critical to us as caregivers. We feel like sometimes friends fall away because we can't do as much as we used to do, or, we're not happy all the time, we're not frivolous. I know I lost some friends when I became a caregiver because I wasn't able to go out as much as we were. But it really starts to show you who's really there for you, who you can count on. And you can keep some of those other friends for the fun times when you need a break and you just don't want to think about, caregiving. For the most part, this journey through caregiving in life, we're going to really focus on those people who have our back, the ones that could be our confidants. Um, and then if you look at this chart, what I find really interesting is enlightenment, of course, is at the top, and peace. And what's right underneath that? Joy. And I think it's really important to take a look at this chart on a daily basis and see what did you feel today on this chart? And how long did you feel it? And are the vibes more positive or are they more negative? And if they're more negative, how can we maybe look at things through a different lens, or how can we do something that pulls us out of feeling grief or feeling guilty and get us to something like acceptance, or love or joy? And so this chart becomes really kind of a great visual to use. And then, of course, brain health, as I said, is my thing. Neuroscience is really important to me. And, one of the things that we know feeds our brains is nature. Being outside is great, but even just having plants in your home, if you have green plants, first of all, there was a study done by NASA that shows that it gives great air care to your environment. Plants are about living things, and just looking at something green, it actually sends signals to our brain to feel more positive, to feel hopeful, to feel like, okay, because it's going back to what we call the ancient brain. And the ancient brain craved, okay, I need to know there's a food source in the area. That meant green plants or something, colorful. So it's really interesting to pull that nature into your life and into even to your loved one's life, to again really focus on your five senses and what are the things that can help you find joy. But going back to just the simple things in life, the quiet moments of being present. And so, here's how your brain, all the five senses are located in different parts of the brain. And there's a little brain exercise that I do with people where we take 1 minute and we just, um, try to find five things you can identify in your immediate vicinity and look at them for that 1 minute. And then, four sounds or four touches. What can you touch? Four things. Feel the texture of it. Three sounds, two smells, and then one taste. And you take about 5 minutes. That you're working out your brain by doing that. And what you're doing is you're slowing things down. Your breathing becomes a little bit better. It's almost a sense of meditation, but you're really focusing on those five senses and making things a little bit more simple. And for our loved ones too, as I said, what becomes important to them. We know that music is the longest lasting memory that somebody that with Alzheimer's has. Playing music from their early era becomes really profound for them, even in end stage. Rubbing lotion or brushing their hair, having the smells that they love. Maybe it's cinnamon. I love cinnamon, so I'm going to write that down. Whoever's going to be taking care of me, please make sure I can smell some cinnamon later in my life. But, thinking about those things and the five senses becomes really important. And then I want to get into our discussion and leave time for that. I'm not going to show this commercial, but I'd love to know if any of you have actually seen this commercial. I'm not here to promote Chevy, and they don't pay me. It was a Chevy commercial, but you kind of forget that as you watch it. It's a great 5-minute video, and it is so well done because it's about a grandmother with Alzheimer's, but it's during the holidays, and it's about how this granddaughter just absorbs all those things that we just talked about, takes her grandmother on a joyride, and it does become joyful for both of them. And I can't talk about it without crying, get all teary. I can certainly put the URL in the chat if you haven't seen it and you're interested in watching it. But with that, I want to turn it back over to all of you, and I'm going to do a couple things here with my screen. So bear with. Stop this there so I can see everybody. And I just want to, welcome you to the session, kind of some of the things I talked about, but also what kinds of questions do you have? What are the things that you're seeking in terms of maybe trying to find more of that joy in your life as a caregiver? And you can, unmute yourself, or I don't know if there's somebody that wants to go first. I'll try to manage this, moderate it. Does anyone you can also I think you can raise your hand, or you can put into the chat if you'd like to say a few words. Um, but if you can tell us maybe what are the things that you have found so far in your caregiving life that have brought you some of that joy, or that you feel it's been positive experience, not just all a big challenge and often stressful. Is there anything?
Well, Sherry, if you don't mind, the positive experience that I have found myself doing is making her happy, surprising because she loves boxes. She lives in a senior building. And I noticed like her expression when she goes downstairs to check to see does she have any mail? And I was like, let me see if I can get more packages going her way, versus seeing everyone else in her building get packages.
I
So,
love that.
yeah, so again, I manage everything. I do her grocery shopping for her from here and Amazon shopping. And I always ask, what do you want for yourself? Other than food, so
Right.
I do that. I mean, I enjoy doing that, but it's just what I do. That's the most pleasant thing that I find myself doing is just being able to be there for her and sharing with her that now it's my turn to take care of her because she did that to us for
Well, and I
us.
love that because you're tapping into that. We all love surprises. Who doesn't love to open
I
up a
know.
box of surprise, right? And to know that, very often as we get older, we start to feel like we're overlooked in society, by family, by others. We're not asked our opinion anymore. Your
No.
relevance starts to go down. And so as much as we can make our loved ones feel like I see you, I hear you, I love you, I'm thinking about you, I think is so critical. So I
Yes.
think that's lovely. Anybody else want to
Mhm.
share any other tips or questions? Do you have any questions about maybe some of the slides that I shared, the stages that you might be in or anticipating? Melinda, you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, I muted and then I unmuted. Okay, so the stages that you were talking about, as of right now, I don't know as of yet where she at. Um, but as far as that video, where are you going to place the video where we can have access to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, Bonnie put in the Taking Care film. That's the one with Lauren and Seth, and I advise you to definitely watch that. It is
Yeah.
very profound, but it's also about how to navigate progression of a disease
Okay.
and do it in such a really kind of a joyful way, even though there's tears and other things. I
Yeah.
will also put into the chat that commercial that I was talking about because I just think it's a 5 minute and it captures
Yeah, that one is
just to
good.
find those moments. And I think that's the other thing I didn't mention. Very often, we talk about, oh, caregivers need self care. You need to focus on yourself and find your me time. It's like, yeah, right.
Mhm.
When am I going to do that? Right. So rather than beat ourselves up because we don't have time for a 1 hour massage or, being on a treadmill for 30 minutes or whatever it is, I say find 7 minutes and you can start real slow. 7 minutes in the first week. That's all. Do something for you that takes 7 minutes. Maybe it's cooking something quickly, because I know sometimes things take more than 7 minutes. Maybe it's reading a chapter in a book that you've set aside for a long time, just one quick chapter or a few pages, listening to music and just kind of looking out a window at nature, daydreaming, whatever it is for 7 minutes that you can do for yourself. What happens is when you start small like that, you start to see, I can get a few minutes back to just me. And then you can start to build on it and it accumulates because, again, we don't have control over Alzheimer's. We don't have control over the caregiving bumps and potholes along this journey, but we can control our own, moments of happiness, moments of joy, and build those into our lives. And if we start slow, that gives us that sense of control back rather than just feeling like I don't have any control. I can't do any of this. So I don't know if that helps you, but start with baby steps, something really simple and small. Yes, Diane. Diane, hi. Oh, can you unmute, Diane? Uh, I'm seeing if I can unmute you.
How about now?
Yay! Okay, we can hear
Yay!
you.
Hi there.
Hi.
So I'm Diane from Rancho Cucamonga, California, and we've been caregiving, and I say we, it's myself and my brother, who lives with me and my husband, and then it's the caregiving's for my mom, who is 87.
Okay.
One of the things that we have been able to bring joy to her and to me is, I know it's going to sound crazy and sound really simple and basic, but it's true. There is somebody in our neighborhood who donates flowers from Trader Joe's every Sunday on a free Facebook site. They say, whoever wants flowers, come and get them.
Oh, I
Yeah, so
love
Trader
that.
Joe's donates flowers, and this person has taken it upon herself to do the distribution of such. So
Oh,
my husband, when he goes to the gym, I don't get to go, but he goes. That's okay. I'm happy that he gets to go. He'll
right.
go and he'll pick up flowers. He'll bring them home. And then my mom is usually still asleep and I get them all arranged. I put them on the dining here. Here's these ones. Unfortunately,
Oh,
these are dying. She's actually in skilled nursing right now.
okay.
But anyways, so while she's asleep, I make the arrangement. I've got my worship music going on because it's a Sunday morning. I used to go to church, can't go now, but I
Yeah,
have that time to worship the Lord, to put
yeah.
a flower arrangement for her, and I'm so excited because she loves flowers.
Oh,
So we
I
put it
love
in the
that.
center of the table, and for breakfast, she's so cute. She'll say, "Oh my goodness, look at what the Lord created. Look at these beautiful." And she gets me even more excited.
Yeah.
But all week long, at every meal, when she does sit at the table, I know I'll be in the kitchen and she'll be sitting at the table going on and on and on, talking about the flowers and describing them to me while I'm cooking. And I come back and she'll do this. She goes, "Look at this. Look at
Oh,
this." Isn't
oh,
he amazing? And
oh.
I have to tell you, ladies, that if your loved one has had a relationship with the Lord and has the word of God in her heart, that's not going away.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, that is a joy because that brings her peace. So when she gets upset and worked up and the whole thing, I can bring her back and she will calm down. Not saying it's been perfect and not saying that she hasn't had her rough times,
Right,
but right now I feel like we're going through a little honeymoon. But I know it's gonna change.
right.
But right now she's finding peace as I'm ministering to her with the word of God, and she's finding peace, and I'm getting blessed too.
I love that. And I can hear the emotion in your voice because what I love about this thought of joy is your focus very much on bringing joy to your mom. But I see it also bringing you joy to talk about it.
Exactly.
And I think it's kind of a gift we give ourselves as well, right? When we can
Mhm.
do something for someone else that makes them just so happy or helps with what maybe they're going through. So that is lovely. And I think you're right. I think that very often, one of the things that I know about resiliency is a lot of it is grounded in a spiritual awareness and a spiritual strength and having a belief in a higher power. And sometimes when I hear caregivers say, I feel all alone, I don't preach about religion, but I feel like you need to find something that will make you feel like, even if it's not a person, there is some higher power. There is something else you can turn to help you, you know?
Definitely.
Well, I love that, Diane. Thank you so much for sharing. That was
Oh,
so
I'm
lovely.
glad I could figure this out.
Exactly. Yeah, you're better than me. I'm sorry. I'm not very tech abled here.
I can't find the microphone to put it louder, so I have you on full volume, and I keep sticking the thing in my ear. That's how techie I am.
Is there
Thank
anybody
you for
else
letting
that,
me share.
of course, no, we love that. Is there anyone else that has a question or wants to share an experience that has worked maybe with a loved one? That'll help everybody? Anyone? No? Are there any I see in here Rachel to everyone, and thank you, Rachel, for sharing this. Having support groups and friends and family you can share your feelings with. I think that's so critical. We're social animals, right? As humans, we're social animals. And very often we forget that when we isolate ourselves, we start to deteriorate. And again, it kind of goes back to that ancient where we lived out on the African savannah and we lived in tribes and we relied on the tribe to survive. Being cast out of the tribe or being alone by yourself, you probably weren't going to make it too long with all this stuff out there. So it really is a very, it's deep in our ancient brain that we need others, we need people to help us survive. And I think that we can find in our social convoy, I call it the social convoy, who travels with you through life or through this journey of caregiving. You're going to have hopefully at least one person that you can turn to, that you're confident, that you can say anything to, and they're not going to throw it back in your face and say, well, you said that last week, and it didn't work out, or, whatever it is. You've got that, at least that one person you can lean on, and they will be there for you at 3 a.m. Then we also have the next circle, and that can be people that maybe want to help. They don't know how, but maybe they want to help. Maybe there's something they can do to help you out or whatever, or just take your mind off of it. And then there's that outer circle too, where again, maybe we just need a quick get away from this, escape from this for a few minutes, have a conversation, go for a cup of coffee, whatever it is. But when we figure out the people around us who can serve us as we're serving our loved one in a certain way, I think it becomes really vital. And one thing I will say about Rachel saying support groups, and thank you for doing a shout out. Hilarity for Charity has a great support group, with several of them, I think that are ongoing. And very often your spouse or partner or adult child or sister or brother or whomever might also be in this, circle of caring for a loved one, but you're the primary caregiver. They may not be there on a daily basis and they don't get it. And when you can go to a support group and they know exactly what you're feeling, they've been there, they can maybe give you some feedback. I find it to be one of the most therapeutic things that caregivers can do, and particularly caregivers of people with dementia, because so many people don't know about this disease. If you haven't been through it, you don't really understand it. So being with other people who really get it and can give that support to you is really critical. And thank you. Heather is giving a shout out to Diane's beautiful story. I love that. The flowers. See nature. Bring nature in. Anybody else want to share? Or any questions? Because I know some of you might be in different phases of caring for a loved one. And as I mentioned, with this disease, of course, it progresses. Everything progresses at a different pace. So, we can't tell you how long certain phases will last, but there are certain changes. And being a little bit prepared for that, having some knowledge and having, this is probably going to come next, and this is how I have to start to adjust, becomes, I think, really critical. The more knowledge we can have about these stages before they start happening with our loved one, the better off we'll be in being able to kind of manage it and balance our emotions and our reactions to things. So is there anyone that wants to share any of those like care transitions and stages that you went through, how you managed through that? Anyone? Well, okay. So Christina just shared something. You can see in the chat, FaceTime with family and friends was fun for your dad. Um, he wouldn't remember who he had just talked with, but it put him in a good mood. That's great. Exactly. That's lovely. I think that's wonderful. Uh, Anybody else? Any other questions? I think very often too, what happens to us is when a loved one is given a diagnosis, we think about their safety, we think about their physical care needs, right? And all the different things we have to research, we have to build our knowledge. So we're doing all kinds of research on the internet or whatever, trying to find the right resources that may help us out. And we're very focused on those tasks, right? And a lot of it is focused on the physical health of our loved one and certainly the cognitive health. We forget about the joy. We forget about just creating environment for our loved one and ourselves that just doesn't focus on the disease, releases you almost for a moment. It's the gift that I loved about the joy rides with my dad. He loved his car, and I'm in California, Southern California, where we live in car culture. So taking the joy ride, and he was still able to drive, through a certain stages, but gave him a sense of, okay, it's not all gone. And then going back to the hometown, that sparked all those memories that he did remember. He could get lost in his own neighborhood, but he didn't necessarily, he remembered all of the turns and twists and stuff in his hometown. And it was just really joyful. It was really fun. And I learned a lot as well. And we had great conversations even, more conversations than if he was just sitting in the Barca lounger, and being sedentary or whatever. It really kind of brought him out of his shell. The other thing too is, he mentioned sensory inputs. If any of you haven't seen the documentary Alive Inside, which is all about music, or if you hadn't seen any of the clips, if you remember when Tony Bennett was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years ago, and Anderson Cooper, I think it was 60 Minutes, did an interview with him, and he didn't really participate in the interview. It was mostly being done by his wife, answering questions. He just kind of sat there, almost a little catatonic, not engaged, not making eye contact. But then they went into the piano room, and his piano player was there, and his piano player started to play, and he was Tony Bennett, and he started singing the songs, and he knew them, and he put the emotion into it. It's amazing what things like music can do to bring the life back sometimes to our loved ones with Alzheimer's disease. And if you haven't used that tool, I definitely, whether it's art therapy, pet therapy, music therapy, all these things are really wonderful for our loved ones, particularly in kind of that second middle stage before they get too much into the end stage of the disease. But even in the end stage, when they're not communicating as much, music is very powerful for them. Yes, Diane?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. On the music, we usually will have music on for our mom, specific to how you've noted during her younger years of what she enjoys. She loved music having to do with like Broadway and those types of things. But every now and then I'll have the music on, and I got to be really careful. Unfortunately, our mom divorced. 25 years ago, and there is music that I know that was her and my dad's. So I have to be very careful to make sure that I'm not letting that turn on, because it will turn her into a bad place. So
Yeah,
there's
that's a
another
really
part.
good point. That's a really, really good point, because we do talk about trying to use music from the era of when they were younger. But I remember that there was this story about years ago, of course, and it was a young woman who was a Holocaust survivor,
Mm.
and that in this particular camp, I guess, where she had been, they had played opera, and it was Wagner. And if she heard Wagner, I mean, it was just, it was almost like the pain, all of it just came washing over. So you're right. We have to be a little careful about, where they were at, where, maybe what made them happiest. And those are the conversations that you want to have early on too. Like, I know for my mom, if anything ever happens to her, Elvis is going to do it for her. I just have to Elvis or Frank Sinatra or Ray Charles. She loves Ray Charles too. So that's on my playlist for her. Uh, Anybody else? How about curious, do those of you who are on this call chat listening to us, do do you feel like you have someone in your life that brings you joy, or that you are getting joy out of your caregiving, journey? Because again, I think so often we look at it as challenging time, we're missing out on maybe other things, we're giving up certain things. But do you find that there are silver linings? Are there things that, or are there people in your life that are making sure that you still have, you know, those feelings of joy? Anybody want to share?
Sure, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, because I'm just a person that stays to herself pretty much. So, as far as like a support group and whatnot, no.
Yeah, and we talk about support groups and socialization helping us, but very often too, for someone who might be more private. Or, I know that Lauren in the documentary Taking Care talks about how initially her mom did not want anyone to know about the diagnosis. And very often our loved ones will say that, I don't
Mm,
want anyone to know I have Alzheimer's. So you don't feel like you can start talking about it.
no.
Maybe
Yeah.
something like journaling could help if you are a person who likes to write down thoughts, or if you like to listen to certain types of music and just kind of escape and do things that kind of soothe you. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that not everybody, wants to seek out a support group, or has even the time sometimes to do that. So at least having an outlet though. I think at least having, do you have someone, Melinda, that you feel if you were just having a day, you can call and just unload?
Well, I tell, yeah, I feel that's something that I would do all the time, because I not only deal with my mom, but I deal with my girlfriend. She's in fourth stage cancer.
I'm
So I just
sorry.
feel like thank you. I just feel like I'm that person that everyone comes to and just lay their everything on me. And I'm like, one day I had to snap back and, I'm like, gee, guys, what about me?
Yeah,
I said, if anything happens to me, then who's going to be here to support me?
right.
And so, and my main focus right now is on my mom, but it still's like, everybody's gone on, whether they have anyone, they can talk to or whatever. But it seemed like it's on me
Yeah.
to do everything. And I don't feel like I want to go back and forth with the same conversations. Do I have people to listen to me? Sure. But sometimes I feel in my head, it's like everyone has their own issues. They don't
Yeah,
want, listen to mine every single day, because again, they don't want to hear it. That's what's been
right,
shared with me.
right.
So I'm
Yeah,
like,
and
wow, geez.
yeah, exactly. And I think that is tough, because I think there are going to be people in our lives where they don't want to hear anything negative or downer or whatever. I had friends that I kind of lost during my caregiving years because it was so on my mind. I could hardly think of anything else to talk about, and they just didn't want to hear it. But I did have really good friends. But I will say my brother was pretty good. He's always said to me, "You're going to be the caregiver." He's told me up front, you're gonna be doing it. I said, okay, that's the deal, but you've got to be there for me. You've got to let me call you and have a day or whatever it is. But yeah, just having those outlets, I think, is really important for us because you can't be expected to just soldier on and take it all on. You need the breaks, you need the outlets to kind of let it out.
Mhm.
Does anyone else want to share? Um, I know we've only got a couple minutes left, so if there's anything you want to share or ask, I'm happy to answer any questions or anything. Do you feel that this was helpful?
Sherry, I was just tapping in. Yeah, I do feel that it was very helpful for me. So now it's just, it's all about exercising it. I did take some snippet notes and everything. So now it's just going about exercising what I've heard. And then, like I said, being able to take that extra time to myself. Because a matter of fact, I took all day yesterday for myself.
Well, and that's good.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't feel guilty about it because
No.
as much as you're giving, you need that back, right?
Yeah, exactly. But thank you so much. And Diane, thank you so much for sharing your story as well. I wish my mother liked flowers, but she'll change any day now. Like, I don't like flowers. I don't want no flowers. So yeah, but she does have green plants in her house
Oh.
because when I went to go redo her house, where her place where she resides, I made sure I bought all new fresh plants for her.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much being done now in that whole area of kind of what we call environmental wellness, which is our home environments, how we create sanctuaries, how we create kind of healing spaces. And the green plants are a big one that have been proven through a lot of research. There was actually a great research study done a few years ago where they took hospital patients who had a view onto nature from their hospital room and those who did not have a view. And the ones who had a view onto nature were discharged twice as fast and needed half the pain medication. So I think there's a lot of proof behind being connected back to nature that makes you feel more hopeful, maybe, which is really powerful. So Jasmine is telling us that we've got to wrap it up, but she did want me to do a little message here that when the workshop concludes, you're welcome to join the Caregivers Connect Lounge. And that starts at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And there's a link in the chat if you want to hit that. And again, and Heather, thank you for your feedback. Roy says, do you know how this and other presentations recordings will be available? Great question. And maybe if Jasmine's still with us, she can answer. I do know that you will get copies of the recordings so that you can go back and listen to them again. I'm also happy to share my PowerPoint slides with anybody if you want those. So I'll make sure Jasmine has those as well, because you can also share them with family and say, hey, this, I attended this, but I feel like you should know this as well. So listen, thank you all for joining. It's really been a pleasure talking to you and learning from you. So I appreciate you joining us and hope to see you in the Caregivers Connect Lounge. So have a really wonderful day.